Good afternoon. Today is January 24th. Welcome back to the Ways and Means Committee to the members. Before we begin, members, please pay your snack fee to Sarah if you would like some snacks during this session, where we will all be in here for long periods of time working. Okay, with that being said, today we are very excited to have three different groups of folks presenting to us, introducing themselves to us. We have new members here on the committee. So feel free when you come up, tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization. We are obviously, the blueprint came out of this committee before I was here. So some of you who are old heads like Delegate Hornberger are very familiar with the blueprint. And here comes Delegate Ebersol. Those of us who came after the inception of the blueprint, like myself, quite frankly, we're seeing what works, we're seeing what doesn't work, and what we might have to tweak to help move some things along, like pre-K and early childhood. So with that, I'm very happy you all met her virtually, but I'm very happy to bring up Dr. Carrie Wright, our new state superintendent. So let's give her a Ways and Means welcome.
Good afternoon. It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'll give just a brief introduction. I think I did that the other day. I wasn't sure how many people were there, but very happy to be back in my home state. I'm a Marylander, went to University of Maryland, all 3 degrees from the University of Maryland. It was really funny. We were having a listening session, and one of the staff members raised their hand and said, "Do you think we could change our logo back to the Maryland colors?" And I'm like, "You're talking to a Maryland Terp." I said, "Absolutely, we'll change the logo." So we changed the logo back to the beautiful Maryland colors for the flag. But I'm really excited to be here. I started my career in Maryland, started as a teacher in Prince George's County, and then moved up into Howard County, was teacher there for a while, was a assistant principal, director of special ed and student services, and then went to Montgomery County Public Schools as the associate superintendent for special education and student services. And then went to the District of Columbia Public Schools when Michelle Rhee was named chancellor there, and served with her for 5 years as her chief academic officer. And then was asked to apply for the position in Mississippi, and therefore that's where I've been for 9 years, as being the state superintendent in Mississippi, and very, very proud of our work there and what we have been able to accomplish for children. So came back here to Maryland in 22 and opened my own consulting company and doing the things that I love to do, which are mentoring other new state chiefs and working with school districts around literacy and working with legislators in other states on building strong literacy laws, et cetera. And then was asked to step in and assume this interim role at the State Department. So this is work I love. This is work I feel very passionate about, and wanted to kind of bring you an update on what it is that we're doing. Yesterday, very importantly, the State Board of Education passed a Science of Reading resolution, and they are leaning in very, very closely on that, and I could not agree more. The Science of Reading has a tremendous amount of research behind that, and having used that and implemented that for 9 years in Mississippi, I can tell you that it paid off for us in terms of the number of children that became proficient by the end of 3rd grade. It paid off for us in terms of the number of children that were growing in reading. And even when the National Assessment of Education Progress came out in 19, Mississippi's 4th graders were rated #1 in the nation for their growth in both reading and math. And if you know anything about Mississippi, it is the state with the highest level of poverty in the nation. And our children in poverty, be they Black, brown, or white, outperformed their counterparts nationally in not only 19, but again in 22 when NAEP was administered. So I can vouch for the efficacy of leaning in very heavily with the Science of Reading. There's going to be a forthcoming statewide literacy initiative that's under my office, as well as building a policy that goes around that. And obviously, we're going to be involving lots of stakeholders where that is concerned, particularly those of our superintendents, our principals, our teachers, our families, so that everybody is well aware of what we are trying to get accomplished here in the state. When I first got here, I also conducted a lot of listening sessions and listening to staff. I mean, obviously I had read, the things in the reports and the news articles that were written, but I wanted to hear directly from them about what they felt was going well and what they felt were some of the challenges. And it was a very robust conversation. And so now scheduled meetings, now that I did the broad staff, we had it both virtually and in person, with the going down into each office now and talking more directly with the people that work there to find out what do they feel has been successful and what do they feel are some of their challenges. We have reduced our vacancy rate. In January of 23, it was at 18.4%. As of December, it was 7.9. We're having a lot of people reaching out to us, I think, that want to get re-engaged in the work of education, which is really a good sign. Our expert review teams, per the blueprint, have been out and about observing across the state. Their job is to go in, take a look, take a lay of the land, if you will, provide feedback to the schools that they visit, and also provide feedback to the department. So it lets us know if there's anything else that we need to be doing. We are in the process of hiring literacy instructional expert teams. They will be going out specifically to look at what's happening across all of our 24 LEAs in the terms of what's happening in terms of literacy, what does that look like, and making sure that we are having the science of reading being implemented. Lots of things going on there. We have also launched a math initiative called Launch Years. Our math scores, to be quite honest with you, are lower than our English language arts scores currently. And so we are partnering with the Dana Center at UT Austin. That's an amazing university that does tremendous work in the area of mathematics. So we have a consultant that's working with us on that. The board also passed the CCR standard yesterday too, as per the blueprint. Lots of still work streams that we're still working on. We are looking at our math pathways, to be honest with you. And when you look at math pathways and math standards, that has to go all the way back down to pre-K. It can't just be something that we look at for math, because you have to make sure that they're aligned from pre-K through grade 12. We are getting ready also to revise our English language arts standards. The last time the standards were revised was in 2008. So we need to make sure that those standards are adequate for what we are expecting all children to know and be able to do. And we also want to make sure that the science of reading is embedded in those standards as well. Career pathways continues to be something we're looking at. When we held a public hearing, I guess it was in December, we heard loud and clear from the community that they were hearing a lot about college, but not enough about career. So we have been able to start participating in two national initiatives, one called Talent Ready and one called Launch. Both of those are supported by philanthropic dollars, big philanthropic dollars. And so they're focusing on work-based learning and developing apprenticeships in our state. And I'll stop there. How's that? I wasn't sure. I could keep going. So how about if I just bring you a quick update on early childhood?
Yes, please.
Okay. I thought that might be on your list. It's a huge success story, and I need to start with that. I don't think anybody anticipated that the Child Care Scholarship Program would be as successful as it is, but it really has. It has blossomed from one year to the next. We're serving 37% more children. We're serving 40% more families. And when other states are looking for childcare providers, we have increased our childcare providers by 11%. We did a massive campaign, a public campaign. We put the team literally tracked down where the largest amount of cars were traveling. So if you're traveling to the Eastern Shore and you know you've got to go across the Bay Bridge, well, there were billboards there. They looked at bus routes to see where bus routes were, right down to the areas that they covered, and they put up huge signs. I was parked in Baltimore waiting at a stoplight and looked to my right, and here's this 4-foot by 8-foot sign announcing our childcare program. So they're everywhere and anywhere, and all of our families are really being able to take advantage of that. Right now, we're serving well over 30,000 children and more than 20,000 families. And so this has also enabled families to return to the world of work if that's what they choose to do, because they now have the ability to have childcare provided to them. And we put forward a sliding scale because the money was we did not have enough money for the need, let's say. And so the governor has been gracious enough in his proposed budget to cover that, what would have been a deficit, to make sure that our families are kept whole. And so what we were trying to do is to come up with a way to offset some of those costs. And we felt that the most appropriate one that we put forward was the sliding scale based on state median income. And I'm not going to go into a lot of the details on that, but it's just simply a way for us to try and figure out a way to help out in something that we feel has just been so very positive for the state of Maryland.
Thank you. And questions? We'll start with Delegate Flakovich-Carr.
Madam Chair, Dr. Wright, thank you for being here. And I just want to say thank you to you and your staff. You've been incredibly accessible since you've come into the office not that long ago, and we very much appreciate that. In terms of the expert review panels you were mentioning and with early literacy, will their results be public, maybe at the aggregate at the district level and at the state level? Because I think there'll be a lot of interest to the committee.
Absolutely. There's one thing about me that you will learn, and that is transparency. So once these reports are finalized, I do believe that everybody should have access to them so that everybody knows what's happening across the state. This is not a gotcha moment, and I need to say that up front. This is really a way to provide feedback to our schools and our teachers and our leaders about what we're seeing in the classroom and what may need to change in the classroom to ensure that our children are learning to read. So our hope is to be very transparent with everybody about what we're seeing and the feedback that we're giving.
Thank you.
Delegate Wells.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Wright, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you.
So obviously all things education are really important to me, but I think one thing I will always be really focused on is the college and career readiness aspect, especially access to apprenticeships and other OJT. And I asked some questions at our briefing on Friday. I do want to dig a little bit deeper into understanding or at least responding to the claim I hear from people that oftentimes our guidance counselors, our counselors, that they are still not really equipped to push students or to encourage students or guide students into non-traditional higher ed pathways. And I wanted to know, is there a policy that you or strategy that you all see that we can be using to either dispel that myth or to, which I think is the case, or to be able to develop a strategy to make sure that those counselors are aware and that they're equipped to be able to partner with the appropriate partners in the community or in programs, but understand how to guide students, because I think that's a big gap that I still kind of am hearing is happening.
So a couple of things there. Yes, I totally agree that there needs to be a strategy, a very intentional strategy, making sure that our counselors are aware of what is taking place and of the many aspects that children the choices that children should have. Because I'm a firm believer that when the children walk the stage in grade 12, that they should have legitimate choices about what they want to do in life. So if they want to go into the world of work, then we should have prepared them with that, with a certification or an apprenticeship to get them there. If they want to go into the military, then they should still have the same skill sets that they would need if they wanted to go to a 2-year or 4-year institution or into the community college to get a further certification, an industry recognized certification. So I think part of what I would need to look at too, and I think our districts would need to look at, is the student to counselor ratio. Even though the National Counseling Association I recommends, I think, at 250 to 1, some of these counselors are dealing with a lot more than that. And I know that the blueprint has allowed funds to hire career counselors in our schools. And so that would be a strategy I think that we do need. I think that changing the way that we look at it, it's not the old world of VOTEC, and you'll hear people even continue to use that term. That is not it at all. When you think about within the next 5 to 10 years, 65,000 or 65%, of all the jobs that are available are going to require some kind of certification, some kind of apprenticeship, some kind of learning beyond just high school. And so how can we start that not only in our high schools? To be honest with you, I want to know how we start building an awareness in our middle schools, because I don't think it's just not appropriate to start at 9th grade. I think that some children have no idea what's available to them. And so we're going to have to be responsible for providing that kind of professional development and providing that kind of information to our counselors so that they're as much on the cutting edge of what is available to children as anybody else. And we want to do that in a way that also meets Maryland's needs, because every every area of Maryland has different needs. So how can we also design these programs that would meet the needs of the specific areas around the state?
And then just one follow-up question. I know we talked about this in the blueprint briefing on Friday, but that there was you were sharing some updates about how the LEAs were working with their workforce development boards to develop plans. I'm curious if in those MOUs, if there was any mention of how some of the one-stop career folks could be utilized on site to help young people connect. I'm wondering if that was there, because I've seen some great models in Texas, actually, in Austin, where they actually have, it's called, I think it's like a Alamo Workforce Source. They have an individual from that local workforce board that actually goes to the high school campuses and connects them with pre-apprenticeship as well as registered apprenticeship connections. So it kind of gives
that is a great
next.
idea. I would need to check into that to be able to
Okay.
give you an answer on that, but that's a great idea.
Thank you.
It's a great partnership.
Delegate Ebersol.
Madam Chair, great to see you.
Nice to see you.
Eschew big preambles, but I'm going to break that rule today. Met you at a convention before I knew, I don't know about you, but I knew that you were going to be our superintendent, and found out you lived close to me and was ready to pick your brain on all sorts of things. And now here you are in front of me, and I'm so excited about that.
Thank you.
Maybe not as accessible as you would have been over a glass of beer, but nonetheless. You are the Wizard of Mississippi. We know that, and it has to do with literacy. And I asked this question briefly at the beginning on Friday, but I want to actually ask the question because you alluded to a math program. And I always say that literacy has this great PR thing going where everybody wants people to be literate. And that's an absolutely good goal. I don't know what term we're going to give it, numeracy or math literacy, but you alluded to a program. And I wonder if you could expand on it a little bit for me.
Can you refresh my memory?
I felt like you said something about a math program, and
I
was
did
scribbling
mention
notes, and
with the Dana Center at UT Austin.
okay.
Yeah. So
Are you
they're,
thinking of anything like
I'm
that?
sorry. Yeah. So it's Launch Years is what it's called. The math program is called Launch Years. And we're working with a consultant from the Dana Center. And what we're looking at are our math pathways, because one of the things that's come up is, do all children need the same math pathway? And I don't think that answer is yes. So if children are heading into the world of STEM, that's one math pathway. But if children are heading into the social sciences or to the world of work, that's another pathway. It needs to be equally as rigorous. Let me be very clear about that. We're not talking about a really, really, really hard math pathway and a really, really easy. That's not what we're talking about. We're thinking about what are the skills that children need to know and be able to do by the time they end 12th grade, and what are those skills that they need to be able to enter into credit-bearing courses, whether they go to community colleges or whether they go to the universities, because I think that is essential. We have way too many children, and it's not just the state. I dealt with this in Mississippi as well. Way too many children that are having to go through remedial classes and pay for those classes, but they get no credit for those classes. And so we want to prepare our children in such a way that when they graduate from our schools, that they can enter as credit-bearing students, whether it's into community college or whether it's into four-year universities. So that's what Launch Years, and that's what the Dana Center is helping us figure out. And that's why I said, but we've got to look at this as our math pathway starting in pre-K, because that's when the little ones first start learning about numeracy. And so we need to make sure that whatever it is that they're learning is aligned to what we ultimately want them to know and be able to do by the time they graduate from 12th grade.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You know, at a high school level, kids used to decide if they're very well-accomplished seniors, should they take calculus or should they take statistics? And that's a microcosm of that decision. They assumed statistics was easier. It's not.
It's not.
Any of you who have done a master's degree know that, okay? But that was a pathway thing for them. So sounds like you're going to be doing that much earlier, and whatever.
And letting children know what's available to them. I think
Yeah.
sometimes children write themselves off. I mean, the old, math isn't for girls thing, or you're just not a math person. Well, everybody is a math person. It's just, how do you get them to see that part of it enriches their lives as much as, well, I'm not going to say as much as, but you know what I mean, in terms of learning to read. You got to learn to read before you can read the math book, but
Right.
they've got to see that math is essential to their lives, and that we've got to dispel a lot of those old myths around mathematics.
Yeah, and the progression in
And the
high school has been very staid. this course, this course in that row. And I hope that we're
Yeah, I think there's a number of ways to accomplish that. But like I said, I want them to be equally as rigorous. The last thing I want us to do is track children. We have no business tracking children. And so we want to make sure that we have access and opportunity for all kids to all things. And so, and then help guide them in their decision-making based on what they want to be. And it doesn't really matter as long as they are starting to think about what their life is going to look like beyond high school, because and I know that kids can change what they want to be, 3 or 4 times by the time they even get out of college. So, but what we want them to be able to think of is, what are the skill sets I'm going to need to be successful regardless of what I choose to do? What are the skills that I need? And that's what we need to be thinking about so that we can ensure that anybody that walks our stage has that set of skills.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
The committee should know I was a math teacher. I know you know.
I do know that.
That's where I'm coming from. Some people are new.
Okay, Delegate Ebersol, turn your mic off.
Get a little excited. So.
Delegate Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So people who know me, as well as Delegate Ebersol, this is going to be one of those occasions that him and I are completely on the same page. And that's actually very significant. I am so excited that you are here, and everything that you have been saying to me is speaking my language. You don't know me yet. I served 8 years on our local Board of Ed in Frederick County. And so I am very excited to hear all the initiatives that you've talked about. And I am tasked with limiting my questions and being more succinct here. So I am going to try to do that, but I definitely want to meet with you about a few things.
Happy
So so looking forward to that. All right. So one of the things is reading, and that's something I've been championing for a long time, and specifically scientific based reading. So where are schools currently? Where are we now? How big of a lift that is going to be? Because one of the issues, of course, facing our teachers is how much things have changed, just so much change going on in the classrooms. So where are they currently? Where are our colleges of education now? What kind of time frame are you looking at to make sure all students will find success through the program?
Good question. So when the Maryland Leads money was distributed last year, the districts were told to choose a strategy for which they were applying for the grant. 23 of our 24 districts chose the science of reading as their strategy.
Okay.
So that was good news. And so now part of what our literacy instructional expert teams are going to be doing is going out now to our LEAs to see, are they implementing the science of reading, and is it being implemented with fidelity? Because it's very different approach than what some districts are used to if they're still using balanced literacy. And I think it's going to take us a hot minute to really educate people on what that looks like, because I shared with superintendents actually on Friday that a staff member was at a school, one of our lowest performing schools, and was asking questions around that. And the school was just absolutely adamant that they were a science of reading school. And so the staff member said, well, can you show me then the materials that you're using for your core instruction? And so when the materials were presented, they were balanced literacy materials. So I think we're going to have to work on building the capacity of our teachers and leaders to know what are the materials that are high quality that should be used in a science in teaching the science of reading or science, aligned instruction. And that's on us to do that. We have a plan to also, I didn't mention this earlier, around literacy. We're going to be providing training to all of the coaches across the state. So we've just completed a survey and asking each district to let us know, do you have a coach, and in what subject areas? And so that then is going to be on us to hold regional trainings around the state. And the first thing we're going to do with those coaches is to make sure that they understand the science of reading. And so they're going to get that kind of training. So as they then return to their districts, they're well informed about what it should look like. How then can they help the teachers, side by side, doing demonstration lessons, planning with them, providing feedback when they do observations, helping a school develop a literacy plan of its own. So all of these things are things that the department is leaning in on where our coaches are concerned, and trying to work with our teachers through the coaches, but we also want to look at what else can we be providing professional development wise from the state that is directly to our teachers around the state that would be aligned to the science of reading. I gave the superintendent some ideas on things that when they're thinking about buying materials, there's places to go that you can get a feedback on the materials that you're buying to know whether or not so those kinds of informations are going to be coming out, if you will, to the superintendents and principals of teachers across the state.
Okay, thank you. And then a quick follow-up on the math.
Oh, 1 second. I
oh,
want to say
okay.
about EPPs. So we are going to be forming a joint committee with, I met with the acting secretary from MHAC and I met with the chancellor from USM, and we're hoping to get a joint committee together between MSDE and those two entities to really be looking at our educator prep programs. That's part of the charge, to be honest with you, with the science of reading resolution that was passed. Part of my charge is to form these relationships, get everybody in a room, and let's figure out what's going well and what needs to change so that by the time that people are coming through our programs, that they are well trained on day one.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then just a quick thing.
Sure.
When are you going to make them pick that pathway for math? I mean, is that, or do we not know?
Well, I think that to me, it's in working with children starting in middle school. And I
Okay.
think that, if we can make them see and understand the various careers that are out there, and then what are the math skills that kind of go with those careers,
Mhm.
I think that, and inform families. I mean, families have to be, informed about this too. That's why I'm saying we don't want to track children. And that's my biggest fear. I don't want anyone to think that they're limited in any way in what they want to do in life. So I think that's going to take a lot of work with our counselors in order to, and also once we get the math pathways, that in itself is going to be a huge communication strategy around what does that look like in schools.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to my colleague for asking half of the question that I wanted to ask. I was going to preface by talking about some of the proficiency levels in some of the schools in East Baltimore and in Baltimore generally. Last year, we heard stories about 23 schools, 0 people proficient in mathematics, 7 of those in my district. And so my question was going to be, not just with math, but with reading, how are you going to attack, making sure everybody understands science of reading, et cetera? You just answered that, so thank you. But what I didn't hear and what I'm asking now is just how are you going to kind of prioritize those schools in those areas? Because I think, really use some support in that aspect.
Well, they have to be prioritized. And that's one of the things that it's kind of an offshoot from this question, if you will. One of the things that we need to be looking at is our accountability model, because I don't believe that we're giving schools and teachers and leaders actually enough credit for growth. And growth is not does not have as large a measure in our accountability model or the star rating that you hear about as it should. But in order to get there, that's the other thing I'm planning on doing, is putting together a task force to really look at our assessment system and are we actually measuring proficiency? Because that's a question I have. And then redoing our standards because once you redo the English language arts standards or the math standards, you're going to have to look at your assessment system and make sure that that assessment system is measuring what you just got done. But I think that all of that is to say, when you get your data back, it's important for us, not only at the state level, but at the local level, to really drill down to individual child. As I said earlier, when I was talking to someone, behind every data point is a face. And if you do not know who that face is, you cannot provide the right amount of help, the right amount of intervention, the right amount of work. So schools really need to be looking at that and drilling down to each individual child, and then seeing what are the science-based interventions that we do need to be providing in both ELA and math, English language arts and math, so that children start to learn and then children start to grow. Right now, we don't have a growth model built in as strongly as I think we need one built into our accountability model. And if you're looking at the data, and the most recent data we just put out in December, I think it was 76% of our schools are rated with either 3, 4, or 5 stars. That was the data point, which was a true statement. But then in the same sentence, you say, and we only have 47% proficiency rates. So something is missing between this, and this. And that's what that task force is going to look at to see, because I think that I think we do schools a disservice for the amount of work that they're putting in if we're not measuring accurately and we're not holding schools and districts accountable accurately. Everybody's accountable. I'm accountable. Everybody's accountable for student learning. And so those are all parts of these pieces that we have to put together to make sure that each child in each school is getting the support that they need. I've got a team that works with low performing schools, but that doesn't mean that that can be the only group. We also have to work with students with disabilities, because many times those are children that are struggling. Are we providing them the appropriate program? Students where English is not their first language, and what are we doing with those children? So it's strategies for each of those groups and each type of learning that's taking place that I think that the State Department, and I'm owning that, we need to lean in and provide strategies for our districts in order to get that done.
Thank you. And a brief follow-up. So, and I'm not asking you to make any real predictions
Sure.
when I ask this question. And we're not gonna hold you to a degree.
To a degree. I caught that last part, yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
The question is though, much of the excitement you've heard from many of us has to do with some of the results that you've been able to help manifest, and especially with the populations. So there's obviously a lot of transferable, hope. And so I guess my question is, for a school that has no one proficient in some of these subjects, and of course, understanding that it's a case-by-case basis, but could you give me a projection just, on a typical experience, a school could turn around in 4 years, 5 years? What would you say?
So I'll give you an example. In Mississippi, the State Department has the ability to take over a district that is low performing. When I first got down there, they were putting what they call conservators in charge of those districts. And a conservator was really just put in to clear any accreditation issues that they had. They weren't really focusing on instruction. So I asked the legislature to change the law to say, to give me permission to appoint a superintendent for that district, and that the superintendent had to remain in that district until the district was rated C or higher for 5 consecutive years. So, and that really put the focus on instruction very clearly. So the last district that we just took over, which was Noxubee County, we put the superintendent in, let's see, this is 2000, I want to say 2021, and that district had been rated F consecutively for I don't know how long, and that district is now rated at a high C and can possibly almost, we're hoping this next year would be a B, but his high school is now rated as a B. And that was a clear focus on instruction, and it was low socioeconomic school. It was kind of a rural school, not a whole lot of resources to it, but you had a superintendent who had a vision for that community and a vision for those schools, and has turned that district around. And so it can be done, but you've got to have a laser-like focus on what's happening with children every single day. And that comes with close monitoring. One of the things I said to the board, we do not have a common monitoring tool in the state. I think we need a common monitoring tool in the state so that we can know at the beginning of the year, in the middle of the year, and the end of the year, how is the state doing in terms of literacy and mathematics? So, but that's the kind of thing that it takes, that many of our superintendents and principals do on the regular basis. But as a state, if you want to know how the state is doing, you're going to need to have a common tool in order to get that through.
Cool. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Dr. Wright.
Good
My
afternoon.
question has to do with food insecurity. We talk about learning and learning aligned with education, but when students are hungry, that's a real concern. And I have a question as to whether or not the state board, or whether it's the Board of Education, has a policy as relates to schools. I know that there are schools that have food pantries. There are schools that have backpack programs of food that they send with the children or students over the weekend. And this is gaining popularity because there's a great need. So I'm not sure if there is anything to address it at your level, or should I hold this question for the Board of Education?
No, more than happy to find out for you. As I sit here, I don't know that we have a policy around that. But I can certainly look into what we do have and get that information back to you. But off the top of my, I wouldn't want to give you false information. And I just simply don't know the answer to that question as I sit here.
Then I'll hold that question for the board.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
That's fine.
Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here with us today and for all of this information. Really excited to be working with you. I especially want to thank you for a few times now you've mentioned in the course of addressing other questions, the need to be really careful to make sure we're not tracking
That's
students.
exactly right.
And I appreciate that and that is, top of mind for you. I guess my question is, how do we guard against it? Because I think even without intent, it's something that ends up happening inadvertently often in our schools, or more often than it should. And so I'm just curious if you can speak a little bit more to how we guard against it, how you work with individual LEAs and individual schools to make sure that that's not happening inadvertently.
Well, I can tell you a little bit how we did it in Mississippi. And so I'm just starting these conversations, obviously here in Maryland. But the one thing that we did, we had a control basically over the course offerings, if you will. We had a list from which, districts could choose that were, it was quite large. But the first thing we did was we went in and we removed every single course that was below grade level. And so we did that very deliberately because I'm a firm believer in grade level instruction and grade level standards. And even though you may not be reading, let's say on a fourth grade level, you still should be being taught fourth grade reading standards and fourth grade math standards. I think that, so that to get the idea, because I think you're sending a message that we're expecting all kids to do that. One thing that we also did was we revised our diploma, and made that, a lot more robust. We did away with diplomas that were basically, just handing kids pieces of paper as they walk the stage. And so now in the state, you have a standard diploma and with 3 different levels of endorsement. And so if you were a student with disability, unless you were severely cognitively involved, then you earned a standard diploma. And when I got there, students with disabilities, the graduation rate was at 22%. And even when we raised the bar and increased the standards, the graduation rate of students with disabilities now is at 67% in Mississippi. And so I think you have to put things in place that send a very powerful message about setting high expectations, because I'm a firm believer that children will do and can do what you tell them they will do and can do, and support them to get there. And I think a culture of low expectations, and which I found in Mississippi, was not helping. People were just not expecting enough of our children. And so I think that there's a lot of different strategies. It's not just one single one, but you've got to send a very clear message that, and particularly here in Maryland, our children, there's nothing our children can't do. There's nothing they can't get accomplished. And so we've got to make sure that we are providing the youth, our youth in the future, they're going to be sitting where we are. And I say that to people a lot. Somebody's going to be sitting in this chair, somebody's going to be sitting in your chair, and we need to make sure that they have all the skills that are necessary for success. And so I think that making sure that the superintendents and the principals and the teachers are really ensuring that our children have access and opportunity to every piece of opportunity that they need. And if that's making sure they've got access to advanced placement, then let's make sure they get access to advanced placement. Whatever it is, all children should be able to have access to that. And then we support our teachers and we support our students in order to get them there.
Delegate Grossman.
Thank you for being here. And you just said something that made me have to hit my button, because I agree that every student should have those opportunities. And I'm excited about what's happening in our school systems, but I wanted to ask, they're only with you so many hours of the day.
Sure.
And when we're presenting those opportunities to them, what strategies you may be thinking about so that when they go home, maybe they're not feeling hopeless or not being supported, and that family members can support them in their math pathway or their career pathway, or, kind of continuing that success.
Well, I think there has to be a role involvement of families and communities. I think that, I think it's just like everything else in life. They're like even a teacher. There are teachers that come to work, come to day one with those gifts that are going to make them amazing teachers. And there's others that want to become amazing teachers, and we help them become amazing teachers. But it's the same thing with families. I think some families are going to need more resources, some family and more help. We're talking about conducting family engagement nights. The department's going to run family engagement nights across the state. And I think that's something that we're going to be continuing to do on a regular basis to just let our families know what are the expectations of children in school, and how then can they help when they get at home. I want to open up a section on our website that's just for families, so that they too have a way to get access to other opportunities and resources that they may not have had access to before. Because to me, it's just making sure that everybody understands what's expected, but also helping people that may need more help in helping their children. And what does that look like? What does that look like for me as a mom? We had in early childhood in Mississippi, we advertised this app that for all families between the ages of like birth to 5, and they could download it on their phone. And then if they were in the car or they were in the grocery store or whatever, they could pull this up by age appropriate and say, here's all the things that you could be doing while you're riding in the car or you're walking in the grocery store. So it's those kinds of things that just to draw people's attention to, I really can be doing something. Just talking to children. And I know that sounds strange, but I'll tell you a really quick story. I was in a store shopping and I couldn't see who was on the other side, but this woman was talking and she was saying, oh, I just love this dress and I love these colors. And what do you think? Do you like these colors? Do you see the color? And she just kept talking and talking and talking. And by the time I walked around to see exactly who it was a mother with probably an 18-month-old that was there. But her constant talk and the kicking and the squirming and you could tell the engagement was there. The child probably didn't understand a lick of it, but the bottom line was she was hearing the words, she was hearing the language. And I think that is what we encourage parents to do. Talk, talk, talk. You don't necessarily have to be talking at their level. You could be reading them off the newspaper, but the more you can expose them to language, particularly at a young age, they may not know what that means, but over time they will learn what that means. It's just those simple kinds of things that some parents don't think about, when they're at home, particularly if they're busy, as all mothers and fathers are when they get home.
100%.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the committee? I just have a quick question. When we met the other day, I told you all of my concerns are based off of experience. They're not really scientific backed, by science. So I had a concern, and I'm not sure if I mentioned this the other day, about the disproportionate assignment of students of color to special education, particularly having behavioral disabilities. And I know you just got here and you've already solved all of our problems here in the state of Maryland.
Don't think so.
So just wondering if you've thought about that, moving forward, how you might approach that. I think, I'll say, I know anecdotally, my mom taught in Howard County for 30 years, and I've heard stories where, folks were just, particularly, some of my brother's friends were just constantly placed in low performing classes, special needs classes. And, she and the guidance counselor would have to call their moms and say, you better come up here. And, if you've got single parent households, working parent households, folks that can't be as engaged, particularly as a person of color, then, teachers might think that those parents don't care, or they never, if we don't ever hear from those parents. So how do we stop that from happening?
Very good question. So you're talking to somebody that supervised special ed for 10 years of my career. So the disproportionate identification of children of color is a big concern of mine. I think that we need to really dig into the data. And that's one thing that the new director of special ed and I have discussed, who happens to also be African-American. I said, I'd like to see this data disaggregated by district, by school. So if we are looking at peaks in some schools, and that gives us an opportunity then to see and meet with those schools to see exactly what is taking place and are those identifications appropriate. When I was in Montgomery County, we did the exact same thing when I was associate superintendent, and it was alarming that one particular school, and I couldn't tell you which school it was right now, but I did then, that was identifying children as late as 8th grade as intellectually limited. And I think you don't just become intellectually limited in the 8th grade. And so it begs the question of what are we doing to ensure the needs of each and every child along the way? My goal would be, and I said this very clearly, we want to prevent children from being identified for special education if that's not what they need. If they need the specialized services, absolutely do they need the specialized services. And I'm not saying that, but I do think when you're looking at the over-identification of children of color, it should give you pause and if not alarm. And I think we need to dig into the data to see exactly and what kind of training are we providing from the department, to be honest, to our special ed teachers in interpreting data. And that's not just special ed teachers, it's also our school psychologists, it's also our speech language pathologists, it's anybody that sits on an IEP team. You know, what have we done recently, you know, to lift this up? So these are things that are on my list. They are always on my list as an educator because I got to tell you, I was one of those principals that attended every IEP team meeting because I wanted to know exactly what the issues were in my school and what kind of help our children needed in order to get better at being better students. So that is always on my radar, and I don't have an answer for that yet, but know that it is something that that's on my to-do list.
Thank you. Well, if you don't mind, I would just like Akila Eileen to stand up and just say hello. She committee is, I don't know her official title, but the government relations for MSCE. So she will probably be engaging with you more because state superintendent might be a little bit busy.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for being here. We really
You're welcome.
appreciate it.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you for asking me.
Next, we have MABE, which is known as the Maryland Association of Boards of Education. And we have John Willems present. We have the MABE president from the Anne Arundel County Board of Education, Michelle Corcadell. And we have my very own MABE Legislative Committee Chair from the Howard County Board of Education, Ms. Jen Mallow. So welcome, and whenever you're ready.
We missed one little button click. My apology. Thank you, Chair Atterbury and members of the Ways and Means Committee. I am Michelle Corcadell, MABE President and member of the Anne Arundel County Board of Education. It is my pleasure to be here to address our educational needs with you.
I'm Jennifer Swigard Mallow, Chair of the Howard County Board of Education, as well as MABE's Legislative Chair.
MABE is delighted to have the opportunity to present on the association's programs and services and our legislative priorities in the 2024 session.
Each year, MABE.
No.
I was seeing what was up there. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. MABE provides comprehensive association and insurance services to all 24 of Maryland's local boards. We do professional development to make sure that our boards are well informed and well educated on all of our students' needs, advocacy, as demonstrated here this afternoon, legal and policy services to provide support to our LEAs and members, and insurance programs to ensure that all of our employees, regardless of the size of the district, has comprehensive access to adequate benefits and services.
Each year, MABE updates our continuing resolutions and our legislative positions and priorities, providing the foundation for our advocacy efforts in Annapolis. MABE's top legislative priorities focus on preserving local boards of education's governance authority, securing sufficient operating and capital funding, and emphasizing the critical role of sufficient local funding. Each of these priorities, local governance, blueprint funding, school construction funding, and local funding, are imperative collectively to the success of the blueprint. To help ensure the success of the blueprint, MABE conducted a statewide survey of local board members, superintendents, blueprint coordinators, and chief financial officers. We asked for constructive solutions towards the success of the blueprint and developed these 5 legislative proposals in response to the highest priority concerns we heard. The blueprint cannot be implemented without an adequate combination of both state and local funding. These proposals, if enacted, would require local governments to provide more than the minimum amount of year-to-year local funding. Many local governments are funding above maintenance of effort, but most are not. And the statewide success of the blueprint depends on the increased local funding. MABE supports that the money follows the child approach of the blueprint to ensure that targeted funding is invested in the teaching and learning of our highest need students. However, the foundation program is the base amount per pupil funding for all students, and school systems would benefit from being able to budget these funds to meet system-wide needs. MABE also supports adding an adjustment to state funding for blueprint implementation in Maryland's most rural schools. MABE is also seeking the state and local government funding for the salaries, benefits, and supports for the 24 local blueprint coordinators. MABE anticipates that the General Assembly would consider these and many other education-related funding and policy issues. MABE will review all bills and funding proposals in accordance with our adopted legislative positions and the deliberations through our legislative committee. MABE anticipates legislation governing the role of artificial intelligence to address concerns about its use in educational settings, particularly relating to student data privacy, academic integrity, transparency, equity, bias, and ethical use. We look forward to working with MSDE and the state board as we consider legislation on AI.
MABE is delighted that earlier this month, Governor Westmore released a proclamation naming January 2024 Maryland School Board Recognition Month. And that was carried over. In addition to that, we received recognition very generously from President Crawford and our executive director here at MABE. And so I just want to personally thank all of you for the support that you are providing to your local school board members in that appreciation. I want to thank you once again, Chairwoman Atterbury, and we look forward to working with you to address questions now as well as in the future as you progress in the legislative session. Thank you.
John, are you speaking? No.
No, Madam Chair,
Okay.
the committee will hear enough from me, I'm sure, in the next 90 days.
We've
Thank
got
you.
other scripts for him. And
Okay.
on
Okay.
the specific
We will
legislation.
start with Delegate Hornberger. And I'm guessing, is this related to AI?
No,
Oh, what?
I already did the AI thing. That was so yesterday.
Oh, he got his questions from AI.
Did. Yeah, so I just wanted to get some clarity. If you could go back to the MOE slide. So you made a statement that in order to fund the blueprint, that you need to do funding above MOE, but you said many jurisdictions are funding at MOE. That's a contradictory statement.
Okay, so some jurisdictions are funding above and some jurisdictions are funding at the absolute minimum.
Right.
What that doesn't take into account is inflation, nor does it restore the escalator. So from
Right, but in terms of compliance and funding the blueprint, can you fund at MOE and still meet the requirements of blueprint?
I can,
ahead.
so if I may, just get a little more clarity. The traditional maintenance of efforts were an escalation based on the wealth overall of the county that we had been operating in.
Right.
And many of our jurisdictions did the absolute minimum at a maintenance of effort, whether it be to limited revenues or of political will. As we move forward with the blueprint, the calculations of the foundation funding coupled with some of the other provisions in that are going to create a challenge of what the locals are going to be expected to fund. And our projections are estimating that that will result in less funding at the local level than will be required for us to do implementation. And that is including any type of adjustments that you may hear that we are doing at the school level, making whether it's an FTE adjustment, a full-time employee adjustment, or operational adjustments. And so that survey is with our CFOs is how we came to the determination and the proposal of legislation that is before you. Did we answer your question, or do I need to go further? I just don't want to.
Yeah, so what I'm not
detailed.
I'm not understanding is there were fiscal requirements. This is math. That jurisdictions had to fund certain amounts. Those may or may not coincide with MOE. They may be above or below. So if a jurisdiction can meet the fiscal requirements, which are enumerated at MOE, are they compliant in the blueprint?
I would probably need a different example because I think the answer would be different if we were in a larger district or versus one of our smaller, more revenue constrained districts in our rural counties, for example.
Because I would want to avoid a district funding below the requirements.
And that's what this helps resolve. So the proposed chain adjustments to the current legislation that we have before you accommodate your concerns and ensure that regardless of, 5 years from now, that the accountability of the local governments funding adequately their education systems will still be in place.
Well, I want to shy away from words like adequately and move more towards it's a dollar amount. So are you projecting that there's going to be counties that if they continue to do MOE will be incompliant of the dollar amount figures prescribed in the blueprint?
They could be at risk of not.
Okay. Thank you.
Delegate Eversole.
You may have answered this in part, but I was having trouble actually because he's so bright. His questions were so good, I couldn't keep up. But can you expand on what the escalator is a little bit? So I'm sure I understand it.
I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Woolham, so you will be hearing from him after all, because I just don't want to misquote, not having, detailed data in front of me. And
I do have to say that the first question you were asked, you did say no. Okay. Did you want to speak? And you said no, Madam Chair. So you're in step. You're doing great. Okay.
Well, I'm going to override his decision there and ask him to fill in, if I may.
So, Delegate Eversole, Mr. Subcommittee Chairman, the maintenance of effort escalator was installed in the 2012 maintenance of effort reform legislation that was crafted in this committee to address a concern that the prior year many counties were able to go below maintenance of effort. And so that legislation established maintenance of effort as the floor and installed this new escalator, which says that based on a look back over previous years, a 5-year rolling average, based on the county's wealth and the county's education effort, based on what share of its available tax revenue, property and income tax revenue it's investing in the school system, if it's funding at the minimum maintenance of effort amount, it could be required to increase that local funding up to 2.5% above maintenance of effort. And so between FY 2014 and 2023, between 6 and 11 counties, varying on the year, were required to step up above maintenance of effort by 1% or 2%, or capped at 2.5%. And so that escalator was very meaningful to a county, I'll say like a Washington County that doesn't qualify for a disparity grant, may have a county government that's funding at the minimum, and that 2.5% bump above MOE was critical to them for the prior decade.
Is it fair to say that geographically it impacts smaller population counties, or is that too general for you?
Specifically, historically, it impacted some of our lower wealth counties in a way that is arguably disproportionate. The blueprint solves some of that. So if you look at the old escalator data that impacted Baltimore City and Prince George's County, for instance, they're taken care of by the blueprint because their local share exceeds maintenance of effort. So basically, none of our maintenance of effort proposals would affect those jurisdictions. But pretty much any other jurisdiction that is funding at the minimum maintenance of effort amount could be affected by the escalator if they're getting wealthier relative to the other jurisdictions.
Thank you. The elevator's at the top floor, and that's the end of that short version, but we'll get back to it. Thank you.
Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Jen, Michelle, and Jim, nice to see all of you back.
Absolutely. We miss you.
So I think one question is about the escalator factor, right? So that seems a great idea in terms of a lot of counties that are facing funding gap. So because the funding gap is immediate, right? A lot of counties even think about a laying of teachers and or other supporting staff. I just wonder if this pause will not address the issue we're facing for many schools. They're doing budgeting right now. And I'm wondering from MAPE's angle, right? What can you advocate? Either add more flexibility to local LEA, make sure they're really not in a hurry to get to that final timeline. And then maybe say, this year we adjust a lot of stuff a little slower. Maybe we ratchet up a little later. Instead, we're laying off stuff immediately.
So I cannot speak specific with your district, but I am a district of similar size of origin. And I can say that the reason that we have all 24 counties on board with our proposal is because we know that that is going to have a different effect on the districts, but will still under its current, if it stays as is, will lead to different limitations in different categories, if that makes sense. So where I'm looking at foundation spending agility to better make sure that those dollars follow the child looks different than some of the demonstrated examples that Mr. Woolham's provided concerning some of our rurals. We've carved out specific language that meets the needs that is to our less populated areas compared to. So in the analysis, this will provide that additional assurance and fidelity of funding in the larger districts, and at the same time, allow for some assistance that goes above and beyond our needs that is specific to those students. Because the foundation 25-75 split does create unique new challenges that the districts previously did not face in the past. And so we are hoping that similar language, if not this, could be added and make the adjustments to the blueprint for the most successful implementation, and to ensure that we don't experience too many transitional gaps. We know we're going to have some, and many of us are approaching that 50 to 2/3 mark of implementation already. We're not just on board, we're all in. Unfortunately, not every district has had the opportunity due to revenue constraints and other issues post-COVID that is permitting them to have moved forward in the same timeline that us larger ones like yours and mine have. So that is why the survey, I think, is important, because it was direct feedback, not just from school board members or not just from a superintendent, but your actual CFOs who have been crunching the numbers and working with you guys individually as well as holistically for successful implementation. Did that answer your question?
Not exactly. I think it's really, there's a problem with the immediate need, right?
Yes.
School is in the budget session already, right? So there's considered laying off teachers, right? So what can we do to avoid this happen?
I'm not familiar with your process, but I do know that there are moments where you can make the effective date. It would be one way to get expedition. And then of course, we're going to need to be a team together. And that includes you guys, includes us, PZAM and MACO for actual implementation. July 1 is our magic date for the next budget. But just like so many other things, like the CCR additional dollars that we're going to be seeing in the next fiscal year, not this one we're getting ready to adopt, you will find that that delay does not delay our ability to, once we get those dollars, to be able to put them in the proper buckets and make sure they're used. But that delay does affect the students and our classrooms the most. So I don't want to make a presumption that in its absence that things will fall apart between this year and next year. I think that would be too extreme. But I do think the sooner we have this reconciled and have an agreement and have come to consensus on our B&Ts, on our funding for our schools, the sooner we can achieve full implementation, working with our partners at the state.
Delegate Wu, I would simply say the 5 number one, or not, there's not 5 number ones. The 5 things that you can do are either collectively approve adding an inflation adjuster, an escalator, changing the foundation program, cost sharing for the blueprint coordinators, and population density adjustment. Those are 5 key things that can be done with an effective date of immediately. So, and they can be done together collectively, or they can be done in pieces if one or more components can be passed at a time.
Thank you. I'm really concerned about the situation, but I really appreciate it.
We share your concern, sir, and thank you very much, Dr. Wu. I appreciate your dedication to education.
Delegate Vogel and then Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and hello, everyone. On your last point on the population density based adjustments, I understand why this is a need. I'm curious about 2 things. One, I see that it's $250,000. Wondering if that's an arbitrary number or if there's something behind that. And secondly, if you can outline for us what those specific challenges are that you're seeing as it relates to blueprint implementation in our most rural counties, I think that would be very helpful.
I think I am going to defer to Mr. Woolham's, being from a non-rural county. He might have a little bit more insight as to the needs of those particular counties.
Good afternoon, Delegate Vogel. The $250,000 amount is the amount that was endorsed by the General Assembly last year for Kent County only, based on a slightly different formula that resulted in only that county qualifying for that grant. And so by broadening the conditions a little bit, these 4 very rural, very low population density counties were captured in our bill draft. In terms of the challenges, a lot of it is about school closings and school consolidations. So Garrett County has very small schools and very long driving times between those schools. And so they're looking to utilize any available funding to address those types of concerns. But there are the implementation. This is a big systemic change. So the money follows the child initiative. Just one key example requires new school financing systems, new accounting systems, new data systems. And while MSDE is certainly working at the state level to do that and benefit us, each school system also has IT innovations and enhancements to pay for. And so that's kind of a concrete example of where this money could be utilized by our smallest jurisdictions.
Understood. And $250,000 alone isn't going to solve the school closure problem, but it's a start. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you all for being here. One thing, and if you address this in some way and I missed it, I apologize, but pre-K, I've had meetings with both Superintendent of Hartford County and the Board of Education of Hartford County, and I know their liaison to MABE was talking about their concern because we've had enormous issues in Harford County trying to roll out pre-K, trying to find providers who want to do it, and also with the payment model, it's per pupil versus per classroom. And I know this model, and rightfully so, the money should follow the child. But in terms of trying to identify providers where the providers don't want to leave 3 or 4 open slots available, they're not getting paid for to meet these requirements, in addition to the requirements already a little burdensome for them as it is. Can you talk about that, the issues with not only pre-K implementation, but also in terms of thoughts around paying per classroom versus per pupil for pre-K, just to be able to bring more providers into the fold?
Thank you very much for the question. I will say that pre-K is its own, almost separate conversation, and I will start there and happy to answer your question. I'm not sure if I'll be able to provide enough detail in this forum, and we can certainly follow up. In the bigger picture, there is the obvious number of providers, of course. Our community school model that Blueprint provides for means that our initial launch of the pre-K will be concentrated to the community schools and within the community school model. My personal district had started a few years back, quite a few years back actually, to pilot pre-Ks in certain designated areas where we know we have concentrations of poverty, one of them being in my district personally. And I can say that they are very successful programs, but they are costly. And at the time, that has been something that the locals wanted to do. This is prior to Blueprint. When Blueprint implementation came in, that was fairly easy. But that only quantifies a few hundred people, students, not to the rigor that Blueprint would provide for. So one of the things we have been able to do is to identify the key areas that we know we are going to have challenges. Certification of the folks providing the education. Our new state superintendent has already mentioned, I believe in her remarks, both today and in prior, that we're going to need to adjust the standards on the curriculum side. The request for adequate facility funding and construction funding, I think, is separate from the pre-K facility funding and should be treated differently because the need is different and we're going to have to be creative. So we need to have a platform where we can have the creativity of our facilities. We know that we can have efficiencies such as educational tier-to-tier when we talk about CCR and career paths of providing in the middle school and high school levels opportunities to create hubs to address those community school needs. But as we sit right now, full implementation of the pre-K is still elusive to us in its practicum and in its course. The state has done a very good job of identifying the opportunities where we can start to move forward and pilot it, for lack of a better term, and it's not really a pilot, but to start to engage in those private-public partnerships. There are many constitutional aspects of it, in addition to accreditations of staff and the adequacy of facilities, both physically as well as those per pupil dollars. And we know that our providers would like to engage, but there is still a lot of hesitancy. So although I could speak probably to what I'm going to need, or I'm sure every single district can, of what their needs are, those are already recorded with the state as part of our Blueprint plans. And so we're working closely with the states. We're going to need a lot of support from the legislature to make sure that the places we need agility are there and the places where we need accountability and equitable approach to it are also being achieved. The risk of creating new inequities in our educational system as it relates to pre-K is a reality that we don't want. And so whatever we can do to either mitigate it or eliminate it, we are on board as a partner to do that.
And I agree with everything you said. And when we're seeing such issues in Harford County where they're throwing so many ideas at the wall right now to try
Yeah.
to get something to stick, they're even talking about cannibalizing library space to allow for pre-K. That's how desperate they are for the facilities right now. So I appreciate your insight into that. Thank you.
Delegate Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so this is kind of goes along those lines, especially about when it talks about creating inequities. And I want you to kind of think about, so I'm from Frederick County, and Frederick County is interesting because we have District 3 and District 4. District 3, if you think about it, is the city of Frederick. It is and some of the surrounding areas. It is very urban, high ELL population, and it will be where most of our community schools will be located. So I want you to think about that, and then think about District 4 is more rural, more spread out. We have pockets of poverty, but they're not concentrated in certain areas. So as we're looking at the funding formula, and I'm a big believer in reaching each and every student, and I also do like the funding following the student as well. But now we're looking at hugely weighted formulas. And hugely weighted formulas in the area that I was just talking about. And so my concern, and as you guys are going forward, you probably don't have the answer to this now, but as we're looking at this, Frederick County might get a certain amount of funding, but if it's following the students, we could be creating some real inequities between like District 3 schools, sorry, delegate, and District 4 schools. We may be creating some inequities as far as the funding goes. So are there any plans to follow that, to keep looking at that, to talk to your local boards of ed? Because I'm of a one Frederick County mind whenever I'm looking at this aspect, as you know, coming from my school board background. And so it hurts me, you know, to think about something like that happening.
I will say that I think that you're absolutely spot on with your concern. And so the foundation, the flexibility and the agility, I'm speaking with some of the foundation money in that 25%, you know, versus a 5 or a 10%, is where we would prefer to be to minimize at least any type. I have a school, I was actually giving an example at the State House yesterday when I was up there testifying, where it meets a Title I standard, but does not meet a community school criteria. I have all of the vulnerable population bells and whistles. When you look at a map, it's in red on the poverty chart from the census. And so we are having to be very creative with local partners. I also know that I am coming from a more privileged district. And so I have partnerships that Frederick County may not have access to. And even take it down to Dorchester, Garrett, Kent, even less so. You're right in that in between, right? So that is something that we know that our formula would help address, and recognize we're probably going to need to go in one more time afterwards and see if we're being successful. That's that accountability, responsibility, and ensuring the measurement of success is there. And anything you want to add, Jen?
Not an example from Howard County, I'm sure we have it, but one of the things that you probably will see is that, say you have a particularly small school in a rural area that has 2 classrooms of 3rd grade students. And both of those teachers have been there 20, 25 years. They earn a higher amount, but without the adjustment to use their that foundation funding countywide, we are going to have to transfer those educators and further disrupt any successes they have had, as well as its effect with how do we, these teachers who are represented by bargaining units, how do we agree to that? Because we may have to completely dismantle, put in new, younger teachers who are not paid as much in order for the money to follow the child.
Yep.
So it will create inequities in a different sort of way. And it is incumbent on us as local board members to follow that and to remediate it where possible. And change to the foundation funding formula would help us to look at it from economies of scale, as well as system-wide needs when we talk about the move to the science of reading. That money that we are going to be spending is really going to be centrally located. It is not going to filter down to the schoolhouse immediately, partly because maybe you buy a curriculum, maybe you buy additional training. You start at the central office so that you're training your trainers for that to then get to the educators. Well, that money isn't going to be school-based at the get-go. It will get there. But when you're starting up an initiative like that, it is a centralized system that you are pushing down in order to bring our teachers up.
Thank you. Thank you for that perspective. Thank you so much.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you all very much for being here today. And wrapping us up today on our educational journey is PASAM, the Public School Superintendents Association of Maryland. And with us, we have Dr. Miriam Rogers from the Baltimore County Public Schools Superintendent, Dr. Maria Navarro from the Charles County Public Schools Superintendent. Delegate Patterson is like, yes. So whenever you're ready, you can begin. And Mary Pat, you're here to answer questions
And
or
just to
moral
take
support.
away.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson. While they're getting started, I wanted to introduce again myself, Maria Navarro, from Charles County, and I am happy to be here with my colleague. Superintendents Group, well known as PASAM. We are very thankful to have the opportunity today to come before you. We are an organization that started in 1954, and our focus areas was to make sure that we speak with one voice and that we provide and advocate for the success of all students. We do that by creating a vision for the future of public education. We engage in the legislative process at the local, state, and national levels, as we're here today. We promote professional growth opportunities. We network together to come with mutual interest and results, and we collaborate with other organizations. We have several current priorities in front of you. I do want to highlight that we are very proud of our Maryland Superintendent's Academy, the aspiring group. It is important for us to develop pipelines. And with the high turnover of superintendents, it's important that we are able to develop and support future ones that will follow us. We are in year 2, and we're very, very excited for all of the LEAs that have participated. Before you, we have our legislative priorities, and if you allow me a few minutes, I will go through details for each of them. As it relates to the legislative priority for adequate funding to ensure student success, we are very pleased with the governor's budget. The support to education continues in the state of Maryland. We do hope to create more per pupil equity around the state and the local funding levels. Especially you've talked a little bit today about the local funding levels and just the variability across the state. And so it's important that, we want to emphasize, and you see that last bullet, historically, MOE has created sort of a predictable minimum for the amount of funding. We would also note that, however, is no longer reflective of the increased cost of running school systems and providing the per pupil equity. So it is one of our legislative priorities. Next is supporting local governance, and I will defer to you to read the slide on local governance because I'm sure you hear quite a bit about that. Our next legislative priorities is something near and dear to our hearts as educators. the teacher recruitment, retention, and induction. We advocate to you to look at bills, proposed bills that help us create these robust pipelines. We love the profession of teaching. It is by far my most favorite job that I've ever had. And I want to let everybody know that it is a wonderful opportunity. And so with your support legislatively, we want to try to find multiple ways to encourage people to come into teaching and to stay in the field of education. The second part of that is we are very appreciative with a lot of support that we've gotten around the support of social emotional learning and supports for our students. As school systems, we are ramping up. We have been ramping up those supports, and we're very proud of the work that we've done. But as always, we look to be able to meet the needs of more students in that area. And today we're going to hone in a little bit on the blueprint for Maryland's future. I've been listening to the previous discussions around the blueprint and the funding. And so if I may, I just want to highlight the very last bullet. When we talk about adequate funding, what does it look like in those deep conversations? One thing that as PSAM we want to bring to your attention is that we would like to see an updated cost analysis of the blueprint by the Department of Legislative Services in a post-COVID world. We had lots of turnover with the workforce. The workforce in education looks very differently with the number of conditional teachers, the supports. And we've also learned quite a bit about the implementation. So Dr. Rogers and I are here today to talk a little bit about what it looks like locally and from our colleagues around the implementation of the blueprint. And we want to start with celebrations. I know there's been a lot of conversations today, but we definitely want to start with some incredible celebrations of this important statewide reform effort. Dr. Wright mentioned the early childhood piece, the increase of Judy centers. We've had increases in our KRA scores statewide. And of course, we talked about just the increases in pre-K participation. Those are important highlights across the state. We talked a little bit about, well, we didn't talk a little bit, we talked somewhat about CCR opportunities, college and career readiness opportunities. Us as superintendents, we were glued to the state board meeting yesterday, looking at what the State Board of Education defined as college and career readiness. But we've seen across the state dual enrollment apprenticeships, opportunities that really prepare our young people for that next step after graduation. And so we're really, really excited that collectively we've been able to move the needle on that. We talked about high quality teachers. We've increased the ESOL dual certification. We've increased as a state the national board certified teachers. And with the support of the blueprint has come specific supports to expanding rigorous learning opportunities for our students with an equity lens. And I will call out the community school supports, the concentration of poverty, the SEL integration into that work. We've increased nurses, psychologists, behavioral health support staff that helps our students ensure that they're ready to learn and can succeed. We have some work still to do. And so while it's called challenges, we believe that a good challenge is just an opportunity to persevere. And so collectively, we want to bring to your attention some of the things that we're seeing as we implement. You know, when it goes to budget, you know, this idea of the COVID relief funding ending and how we across all of the school systems are able to transition to that is it's extremely important. We've had variability across our districts for the ability to be able to do that because that is tied to funding that must now be added to our operation budgets. The requirements on teacher salaries is mixed across the state. I will tell you my personal county, Charles County, we've done great strides on that. But I know some of my peers that started with salaries that their starting salary was in the low to mid 40s. And so it's difficult for them to make gains every year in the way that they have. And it depends on sort of their local budget support above MOE. The 75% expenditures, we talked a little bit more. And then one of the things that I want to queue up is continuously is the special education cost and the funding for it. We've learned a lot about physical space. So expanding pre-K means you got to put kids somewhere. And so we continue to think about how do we do that. We have mixed results across our counties in terms of our flexibility to be able to do that, along with CTE programs and other innovative programs. So we're being very creative. We want to let you know that. And we have examples for that to share. The career ladder is, we have variability about our local negotiation capabilities and then how we're able to move that. And then more importantly, I'll tell you as a superintendent, I have to sort of set the tone in my district, and I have to talk to my teachers about how they view that, especially with a changing workforce, a newer workforce. And then just the continuation of communicating this work with our communities. I want to give you a couple of shout outs of successes because Dr. Patterson is here and because I got a chance to present. So I have talked about Charles County. In Charles County specifically, you heard Dr. Wright talk about the increases in pre-K. I think we're 41 kids under, but we almost doubled the number of pre-K students. So imagine from 21 to 22 to 22, 23, doubling the numbers. And so that is incredible opportunities for our young learners and expanding those opportunities to more students. We've also increased the number of our nationally board certified teachers, as many of my colleagues. We're very proud to have expanded advanced placement offerings across all of our high schools. And I have to say that Charles County was the first county in Southern Maryland that implemented early college programs. We are going strong. We're working very closely with the College of Southern Maryland, not just doing early college programs, but early CTE certifiable programs. We don't have to build an infrastructure if the college has it. So we are expanding those programs and we're very proud. And the blueprint has given us flexibility to be able to do that. You've heard a lot about apprenticeships. We are the second largest employer in our county. Sometimes I think we're the first, depends on the naval base. But we have to model to all of our businesses that we are also an employer because we have the largest IT company in our county. We are the largest restaurant. Every day we feed almost 29,000 kids. So we are an approved apprenticeship site from the Maryland Labor. And so we provide apprenticeship opportunities within our school system, and we're happy that our local county government has also expanded those opportunities. We are thinking through our challenges, and I will give you just a few. The career ladder is something that we have a work group. It includes our teachers, our principals, our union representatives, and central office to figure out how to do this and how to do it specifically, potentially across all of our schools, but starting with some of our schools who tend to have a lot of new teachers and new staff. So Pillar 5 actually has a quote around scheduling policies that discourages disproportionate placement of novice teachers with students where achievement gaps exist. And I have to say that although not as severe as I've seen in other places, we do have schools where students are more impacted by poverty, where we have also our newest teachers. And so we have to work with our unions to disrupt that. The blueprint calls out for that work and we need to do it, but how we do it is a different challenge depending on where you are. And so it's a reality that we are working through, but I just wanted to highlight as a challenge. And then finally, as I mentioned before, for my colleagues, not just in Charles County, that ability to meet the 10% salary increases and get to that minimum of 60,000 looks very different depending on the county that you are, continues to be a challenge for many, as well as navigating, frankly, the local conversations with all of our communities to understand the intent of the blueprint, the type of work that we're trying to do, and have full community buy-in from all of our community stakeholders. So this is some of the work in Charles County and beyond. Dr. Rogers.
Yes, thank you. I am pleased to share with you some of our successes in Baltimore County Public Schools, specifically around early childhood education. We are pleased to have opened some additional programs mid-year this year with the added flexibility that's been provided in terms of space. And we also have planned to open at least 49 additional sites this upcoming year with our FY25 budget. The blueprint has allowed us to provide additional special education support, particularly for our inclusion students. And some of that support is going to be placed in our elementary schools so that we can really meet the needs of our youngest learners and move away from a structure where our youngest learners are in cluster models. So our youngest learners can be served at their home schools. And we were very excited that this year, as a result of these efforts, we were able to provide an intensive 5-day professional learning program for all of our pre-K educators to make sure that they had the skills that they needed to meet the changing post-COVID needs of our 4-year-olds that were coming into the school system. In Pillar 2, related to highly qualified and diverse teachers, we are proud to be the second highest paying teacher starting salary in the state of Maryland. We also have paraeducator, post-bachelor's, and undergraduate cohort programs working closely with all of our local universities and colleges near us. As you know, the pool for teachers has dwindled quite a bit, even in areas where it was not typical. Those areas specifically when you think about counseling, physical education, social studies, every area, especially our related service providers, is an area of need. And so we're having those conversations with our university partners about how do we grow our own, how do we make sure that we're equipping our current paraeducators so they can move into teacher positions, as well as leveraging our partnerships around teacher apprenticeships, really working with our students who show a desire to learn more about educating students to employ what we're calling a door-to-door approach, working with our universities to make sure that our students are college, career, and community ready when they leave us at the end of 12th grade. They're taken care of during their 4 years, and then they come back so they can serve our school system. We think about the challenges around Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 for our school system, as was mentioned earlier, the capital needs for expansion for our school system being so large. We have over 8,000 students that are identified as qualifying for Tier 1. And so even though we're a very large, the third largest school system in the state, we also are one of the oldest in terms of the set of buildings. And so, with that comes some overcrowding and some capital needs to meet the needs of our students. As was mentioned by our state superintendent, as well as I believe the state board, working with private providers to really encourage additional participation opportunities so that we can meet those growing needs across the system is an area of challenge for us. It's an opportunity. As well as when we look at Pillar 2, the career ladder, really focusing on the national board certified teachers, that incentive yielding a larger number of teachers as there is a pay differential that comes for being national board certified, and even additional pay if you chose to go to a high need school. We are finding some challenges with attracting large numbers of teachers to that pathway, as well as identifying more diverse candidates to be in alignment with Pillar 2 of the blueprint. Reference to Pillar 3 and 4, we have seen some successes in Baltimore County Public Schools. We are very pleased to have among the top percentage of students who have completed a CTE program. We have a robust relationship with our local community college, CCBC, expanded partnerships with junior achievement. We start as early as 4th grade to make sure that all of our students are aware of the different pathways and opportunities that exist for them, and that goes all the way through high school. And we have increased this year our youth apprenticeship opportunities for our students, almost tripled from 66 to 195 unique experiences this year. Pillar 4, that really speaks to providing more resources for our students to be successful. We are excited about our opportunity to provide expanded health services to our families, to have this year announced a middle school mental health pilot, working with a partner, Cigna, and a high school telehealth pilot. Post-COVID, those needs are more pronounced with our students, and they are asking for the help, and we know that we must address their social emotional needs so that we can focus on their academic needs as well. And we're also excited on the way that we've been able to leverage a neighborhood approach to community schools and how the Blueprint funds have allowed us to continue expanding our community schools across Baltimore County. In terms of challenges for Pillar 3, trying to provide access for as many students as possible, especially this upcoming year with the end of the ESSER funds, and providing post-CCR pathways. That is a challenge for us, as well as being able to develop those individualized CCR plans for our students and provide reassessment opportunities. And that is most important because with reassessment opportunities, then students can, according to the Blueprint legislation, have access to additional pathways, whether they are CTE or additional pathways with our local universities and colleges. And so with that, we are here and happy to answer any questions that you might have for us.
Thank you. I will start with Delegate Patterson because I know she is very excited that you are here.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yes, I'm very excited that Dr. Navarro is here. She's done a great job in terms of leading Charles County Public Schools. And my question is to her because as a result of COVID, it was a heightened awareness of the need for behavioral health and mental health. Can you share briefly the training that was offered through your department, your office, your board, as it relates to suicide? We had a program in December where we addressed suicide awareness amongst African-American youth. And at that time, there was some mention of offerings within the Board of Ed.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Patterson. I first kudos to you and the community in Charles County who sort of made this also a community issue. So it's not a school system. We're alone in this work. We have done for our staff first aid mental health training, and I think a lot of our school systems have done it. We saw a need to do this training and expand it to our parents and caretakers and family members, anybody in the community who deals with youth, because it's really an important training. It's a 2-day training, and as an individual in the community, you leave with not just knowledge, but you leave with materials to know what to do, who to call, and where to get support for anybody experiencing mental health issues. We spent some time understanding the developing brain of youth and understanding what's normal behavior and what is not normal behavior. And that also helps parents. If you're a parent of a middle schooler, as I am right now, it can be an interesting time in life to understand what their behavior is like. So we want to provide them supports. And the data is very clear. Our communities of color disproportionately are impacted by mental health and are more prone to see high numbers of suicide. So we decided to do that, and we're expanding it to do that work as well. And as Dr. Rogers mentioned, in Baltimore County and Charles County, we also expanded telehealth supports for all of our secondary students.
Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you could jump back to the earlier slides specific to Pillar 5. My question is, so now that we're sort of boring out the money following the children, what we're seeing is that the schools that are the highest performing tend to be lower cohorts of the English second language, poverty, etc. And there's also a concentration in those schools of the highest performing teachers. So in order to reconcile that, we've got to move, because we only have a finite amount of money, we have to move those high performing teachers from that school that they might have been at for 15 or 20 years to that school that has the lower performing students in order to be in compliance with Kerwin. So my question in reference to Pillar 5, and you've alluded to it somewhat here, is do the superintendents have the discretion to move teachers around to be in compliance of Kerwin? Or is that something that is enshrouded in their union agreement and precludes them from doing so?
No, so I would like Mary Pat to double check me on this, but based on Comar, the superintendents across the state are able to move staff accordingly. If I may, I will say, as we are tackling that in Charles County, one of the things that we're doing is talking to teachers who are currently nationally board certified or who are long-term in our school system and maybe are our low impacted schools, and talking to them about what, besides the potential salary bump tied to nationally board certified, what other things are you looking for in the structure of a school that supports high need students that would help you leave your current place and come to that? And I think that's an important step. And as an educators, we spend time looking at that because the ability to move individuals exists within the superintendents. But what we want to find out is what would excite a 20-year Charles County nationally board certified teacher to go to one of my highest poverty schools, my highest English language. And we have to ask our teachers, and we have to bring them into the conversations and create the environments in those schools. And I think the blueprint provides a lot of opportunities for us to be thinking about how to do that, and just project out how to be able to do that long term.
Oh, that's very helpful. And then my follow-up question for that is, it's great to incentivize folks, but ultimately they may decide not to move. So now you're in a situation where you have to spend the money on the students in the school because they're in that school, but you don't have the teachers to fulfill the funding requirement. So how do you reconcile that? Are you allowed to have discretion with the money and to put it into equipment, facilities?
Well, what I would say to that is there's no doubt that, at least in Charles County, about 85% of our budget is people.
Correct.
So we have to look at the people factor because there's not enough instructional materials that you're going to be able to purchase or PD days you're going to be able to purchase to really make some of those deficits.
So you in other words have to force them to move against their will, I guess is where I'm going with
well,
that.
we're working through that. So my hope is that if you engage people early on, we may be able to incentivize for reasons other than money, working conditions, which are important. And I will say my union is part of my work group because that's just the reality we're working through. So we will keep you posted.
Okay, thanks so much. Appreciate that.
Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for this presentation. I really appreciate how you shared some of the opportunities and successes along with the challenges. I think oftentimes we hear the challenges and that's important, but hearing some of the transformations that have happened because of the blueprint is extremely helpful. I wanted to ask about the mental health program, that the pilot in telehealth that Dr. Rogers mentioned. Could you talk a little bit more in detail about how that's working? We're very interested in the issue of mental health for students.
Thank you very much for that question. So we have two situations in Baltimore County. For our middle schools, we have partnered with Cigna. And so we have 5 schools that we selected based on their data, based on the identified needs of the students. And what that provides are licensed health professionals. But the service is available for not only the students, but the staff and the families. And so, we are following that. to see, the impact that it has on social emotional well-being of the students, but also how it impacts the families, how it impacts the staff. In many of the schools that we selected, they are, our schools with some of the highest needs. They're some of the schools that have, perhaps a larger percentage of turnover. And as my colleague, Dr. Navarro, shared, while COMAR provides the opportunity and the law that allows us to move people, one of our responsibilities is also to climate in the school system, making sure that not only our students are part of a positive climate, but also our staff members. And so we think also providing these resources around mental health helps with that. And then what we have that we announced for our high school students is a partnership with Talkspace. And that one is available to all of our students. Our students are typical teenagers and they're with their cell phones, more often than not. But we also know that sometimes they need to talk to someone and it's not always convenient hours. We know that there are shortages in many areas. And so we were very fortunate and very pleased to be able to announce this partnership. We announced it right before the winter break and we were pleased to receive data about how many students, how many hundreds of high school students accessed this support. And so their support in terms of, meditations and daily affirmations for the students. There's also, courses and strategies, but there's also the ability to schedule talk therapy. The students can do that, via what we would call video chat as well as text. But what we find that, is also important are the high school students typically will identify, as we have worked to destigmatize mental health needs, they will typically identify when something is of concern with their friends. And so really equipping all of them with the ability to ask for help, to ask a adult, a professional, is something wrong? What should I do with this? We found that to be helpful so far. And, we are excited about, what that's going to mean for our students long-term.
Delegate Eversole.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you. And again, I'm trying to do this, but I got a new superintendent. She's newly appointed, but has been in service to Baltimore County Public Schools for a long time. Welcome. So thank you for being here. Yeah. Two things on slide number 7 about teacher recruitment, retention, and induction. I'm going to put it up or not. One was relatively simple. It said expanded loan assistance. What sort of expansion are you talking about? You just want us to put more money in for teachers? Are you talking about reaching out to other professionals in the building? What's your thinking on that?
I believe last year there was a bill that looked at supporting the Grow Your Own programs and expanding the supports. I don't believe that bill was fully executed. So we really like pieces of it. I think helping us at the local school systems have more options and pathways and frankly funding to be able to pay for Grow Your Own, flexibilities for potential payback scholarships by coming back and serving in our schools. And then I will also say, advocating for my peers, the access and opportunity to higher ed institutions and programs depends on where you are geographically. And so I just want to cue that up also as a sensitivity to different places of the ways you can make partnerships and logistically carry them out and have them happen in your school system. So I would just cue those as examples.
And we did do some expansion of that in the Governor's Teacher Shortage Act last year that we worked on. So I hope there's money waiting around.
There is absolutely funding and we just want to.
We can work together.
A
make sure people know about
additional as well. Yes.
Sure. Other question is, and this is one that really does concern me on a different level. We gave teachers incentives to get national board certified. They can get $10,000 more a year, not just 1 year, but ongoing. And then we offered another $7,000 if they would teach at a low performing school. And I heard you both say at different points in this presentation that may not be getting people to go to them. That's right. Do we need to offer them like $20,000? In other words, is it a lot more money, or what is it that's holding people back from wanting to teach at schools that are low performing? In fact, having taught it some, the rewards are great. And how do we convince people of that, at that? So Dr. Rogers, you said it right away, and then later on you referenced an answer. So can you just give a little bit of feeling for what kind of steps you or we could take to get people to teach at low performing schools? Because we need them there for sure.
So thank you for that, Delegate Ebersol. One of the conversations that we've been having is around identifying National Board Certified as the one measure, to qualify for the highest level of the career ladder. What we found anecdotally as well as quantitatively is, that it's a lot of work to become nationally board certified. And particularly, if you are either a novice teacher or you're working at a high needs school with a lot of needs, people might not be as interested in going through that process. And so we've been having the conversations about what are other markers of highly successful teachers that may not only look like being a national board certified teacher. And I will share for you one of the incentives that we put in place last summer to recruit teachers to our high needs schools, some identified by the state, but also those with large numbers of historic vacancies. It wasn't even as much as an incentive as you have for national board certified teachers. We offered $4,000 and teachers were willing to make those moves also in the area of special education, but it came down to what we were providing throughout the year. Finances are tough for everyone. These are challenging times. And so it's really about those working conditions. Teachers talked about climate, making sure that they felt valued, that they weren't shying away from a heavy lift and from hard work, but they wanted to go to a place where they felt that their input was valued. And so for us as a school system, what are the steps that we need to put in place? How do we continue to develop the capacity of our principals, but not only develop their capacity as leaders, but provide them with the supports that they need so that they can differentiate the needs for our teachers. And part of that was really around recruitment and retention overall. The more vacancies that you have, the more impact it has on the teachers in your building. So, what are some of those things that we need to do as a school system to not really just talk about the funds, because if you're really invested in a space, whether it's high needs or not, the funds we haven't found are actually drawing large numbers of people to make that move. They're talking about working conditions. How do they find that balance? Because many of them have families as well, and they want to go to a place where they're going to feel valued and respected.
Delegate Wims.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm so glad to see you here today because I have a question I wanted to ask, and I think you can answer it for all the superintendents. As you know, if a child is not in school, they can't learn. And we see the high number of truancy and so forth throughout the state. But what I'm hearing from my constituents, and this is the question to you, it's about bullying. So could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing as superintendents to try to curb the number of incidents from bullies in our schools?
So I think there's a couple of things that come to that. I think we also a huge increase in chronic absenteeism, and some of that is feeling safe in schools. I will tell you that when our students came back from COVID, there was just a lot of inappropriate behavior that we had to go back and teach children how to behave with each other. And then we had to provide a lot of behavioral supports to tackle some deep trauma that led to students being aggressive and bullying other students. So we've been, as Dr. Rogers and I mentioned, we've been doubling down with the supports for behavioral health, mental health, and supporting not just the students that maybe have gone through trauma, and that's why you see that behavior going on, but also the students that are bullied in school, and how do we support them and their families. So I think for us, it's been the doubling down on overall behavioral supports. We also came back and had to remind students about the student code of conduct. And so we don't just deal, in the reality of educating young people, it's not one way or the other. You have to deal with both things. And so you also have to have strong structures, a lot of support. We have to have rules, strong codes of conduct. And we have to invest and continue to invest in the behavioral and mental health support for students, because students or anybody who does bullying behavior, many times there is some level of trauma that is making the individuals act out. So we have to address that. And we also have to protect other students from those things happening to them by creating strong structures in the schools.
Okay, thank you. And I'll talk with you after the hearing about some ideas that I have. Thank you very much.
Delegate Miracle North.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you both for being here. I'm very delighted to hear your presentation. I had a couple follow-up questions for each of you. Dr. Navarro, you mentioned, this just goes along the lines of the conversation Delegate Eversol and Delegate Hormiger have had with bringing in teachers. You mentioned the blueprint doesn't want to put new teachers in the highest need, but that's currently in place. Would the new concept of the interstate compact for teachers help? I know that's something that's a relatively new concept nationally. And from my understanding of the interstate teacher mobility compact, if you have a bachelor's degree, if you've been approved in another state to teach, there could be an option to, so you're not necessarily familiar with it. Could you speak to whether there have been any conversations regarding that concept to perhaps deal with that need to not have new teachers in those high-risk areas, but possibly have them if they're a part of the interstate compact?
So I think we would always opt out for more flexibility in our opportunity to recruit people who are have some level of certification and want to teach and may just need to get the Maryland certification. So that level of flexibility, I think we would very much support. I look at Mary Pat when I say that, because flexibility helps us, right? We are dealing right now with a lot of conditional teachers. And I will tell you, in Charles County, 40% of my teachers are either within their first 3 years of teaching, they're long-term subs, or they're conditional. We've never had 40% of staff in a building be so green or new to the profession. So anything that gives flexibility, I think we would definitely be interested.
Okay. And my other question to Dr. Rogers, in your presentation, you had a slide about youth apprenticeships and the increase in opportunities, but I noticed the completion rate was lower. Could you speak to more about what was going on there, and if there's anything we can do legislatively to change that?
Absolutely. Thank you. So there are two different things. So the youth apprentice program, those opportunities for our students, usually upper level students, to have those experiential opportunities in industry. And, we are also one of the employers. And so we were able to triple those offerings for our high school students. And that's, going very well. Really started, that work this summer versus the first one. So the initially, and I don't know if we'll see some changes in Blueprint, initially the goal for the state would be that 45% of students that were, involved in a CTE program completed it to earn the credentials. My last check at the overall state percentage, that was in the high 20s. And so we highlighted, just recently, yesterday, there were some changes, but before the changes, we were at 42%. So a little less than the goal overall for Blueprint, that our students are doing very well in terms of not just participating in a CTE program, but also making sure that they're credentialed by the end of that program.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I don't see any other lights. I just have a couple of questions. My first one is more of a comment, and I want to, first of all, thank you all for being here. So let me start with that. Second of all, Delegate Eversol pointed out when we started talking about grow your own, that we did do some work last session, which I'm quite proud of. So for the new folks, we did expand a loan repayment program for teachers, and we worked on a $21,000 stipend option for folks after we saw a young lady from Morgan State who was struggling, and she just really wanted to be a teacher. And this was the type of person that I wanted to teach my kids, particularly my daughter, and actually Delegate Patterson immediately got up and started asking folks to help provide her some relief. So I am very proud of that work. I know there can always be more done. There's only so much money to go around. So my question really is going to focus on teacher retention and in terms of African American students. And the Baltimore Banner did a really long article not too long ago that was really comprehensive about African American teachers in the state of Maryland. And I immediately forwarded it to some folks because I like to say everything, my opinions related to education are based on my experiences with my 3 children, one who's in middle school, so I totally sympathize with you. And the other 2 are in elementary school. So it's not scientific based, it's just mommy based. And so in Maryland, a third of students are Black, but only 20% of the teachers are. And the article, after interviewing dozens of teachers, said that they felt there was a lack of mentorship, a lack of growth opportunities, and we're trying to work through the blueprint in terms of the lack of pay. In 2020 to 2021, after COVID, when folks went back to schools, 12.3% of African American teachers left compared to 8.5% of white teachers. And they found that white teachers left for positive reasons like retirement or a better paying job or something like that. And currently in every school district in Maryland, except for Garrett and Prince George's County, there's an increase in African American students that's significantly larger than the teachers there. And we know that for whatever we're talking about, an African-American student, when you talk about gender, LGBTQ, people feel safer when they see someone that's reflective of them. And particularly with everything that's going on in the country. I mean, the past few years, we've had COVID, we've had, police reform, we've had, certain presidents. And so people want to go to school and feel safe and have these discussions. So I just want to know, what, if anything, and you may not have an answer, is your organization doing as across the board and as superintendents to try to retain African-American teachers in the different jurisdictions here in the state of Maryland?
I can share what we're doing in Baltimore County. So thank you for that question. It's actually a conversation that we had yesterday again around as a part of our budget process. And so we realized through stay conferences, we wanted to find out not only the reason why teachers leave, we wanted to find out the reasons why they stay. And what emerged from Ms. Griffith's article was some of the same things that we heard, particularly around the mentorships. And so we were, as we were taking a deep dive into the budget, able to identify funds that we had for what we called peer advisors that were more technical in nature that might have worked prior to COVID. But what we found that our teachers need, especially now, is that old-fashioned teacher mentor. That person, there's plenty of access to content and pedagogical training, but that person that's going to check on you, that person that's going to check on this document, before you send it to a parent, the person that you can just share that you had a hard day and they say, it's okay, tomorrow will be better, and keep you moving forward. That's what we've heard from our teachers that they really need. And so a part of our work, we were able to use Maryland Leads Grant to get the information, but we are, going to be able to use some existing funds to give those old-fashioned teacher mentors. We also are looking to tap into our retired teachers who are invested in, teachers reaching retirement age across the system to help us with that work, as well as, investing in that professional learning, making sure that people can be their best selves, and that we're providing engaging professional learning. And we're going back out to buildings to see how people are doing and how, curriculum and things of that nature are being implemented in the classroom. But certainly, with a large system, with a large diverse system, we want our students to see, you know, people that look like them that are invested in their education. And so that means that we have to be creative about where we're looking, expanding our relationships with HBCUs, expanding our relationships with Latino organizations, with Latinx organizations, and just doing expanded recruitment to bring in high quality teachers to our workforce is part of what we're doing now.
I would just add in terms of the roles that you play legislatively, you know, we are constantly battling the crisis in the classroom PR that has gone in education, to be honest. And so we have national movements like Real Men Teach movement, and we have some of those that are kind of fighting back about that concept of what our schools look like. And what teaching is all about. So just know that we're constantly advocating and reteaching while you're sitting in the grocery line or whether you're at practice, dismantling some beliefs about our schools and our young people. I would just like to echo that very much in Charles County, it was the same way. We have a predominantly white teaching force, but for the last 4 years, our recruitment has been strategized to bring teachers that look like our students, because the research is clear around the impact that they have for students in terms of supports and identifying gifted students earlier and so forth. So we've been doing, you know, the majority of our new recruits are teachers of color, predominantly African-American. We're still trying to work on our teachers of Asian teachers and Latino teachers. But from a legislative perspective, I would say that mentor those retirees. I've learned that you don't speak to retirees as a full week of work. You can only talk to them to maybe come back on a Tuesday and Wednesday, and then maybe they'll listen to you. But there's got to be incentives for retirees, especially people that are retiring and living longer. And, you know, we are an aging nation. What incentives would be for them to do that? We found close to 100 retirees who are our mentor to new teachers, because we have so many new teachers, and they go in 2-3 days a week, and they have their caseload, and then they get Fridays and Mondays off. And that's okay. I'm totally okay with that. But finding ways for retirees to incentivize to go back into the classrooms for support, I would just offer that at your level.
Thank you. I like the retiree idea. Thank you.
Very helpful.
So I think that rounds us out. Thank you all for being here very much. Thank you. Thank you, committee. We have a briefing tomorrow at 11 and hearings at 1 o'clock. See you on the floor tomorrow morning.